2 Chronicles, chapter 7, Fire from Heaven. Now when Solomon had made an end of praying, the fire came down from heaven and consumed the burnt offering and the sacrifices, and the glory of Yahweh filled the house. The priests could not enter into the house of Yahweh, because the glory of Yahweh filled Yahweh's house. All the children of Israel looked on when the fire came down, and the glory of Yahweh was on the house, and they bowed themselves with their faces to the ground on the pavement, and worshipped, and gave thanks to Yahweh, saying, "For he is good, for his loving kindness endures forever." Solomon's solemn sacrifice. Then the king and all the people offered sacrifice before Yahweh. King Solomon offered a sacrifice of 22,000 head of cattle and 120,000 sheep. So the king and all the people dedicated the house of God. The priests stood according to their positions, the Levites also with instruments of music of Yahweh, which David the king had made to give thanks to Yahweh when David praised by their ministry, saying, "For his loving kindness endures forever." The priests sounded trumpets before them, and all Israel stood. Moreover, Solomon made the middle of the court holy that was before the house of Yahweh, for there he offered the burnt offerings and the fat of the peace offerings, because the bronze altar which Solomon had made was not able to receive the burnt offering, and the meal offering, and the fat. The Feast of Dedication. So Solomon held the feast at that time 7 days, and all Israel with him, a very great assembly, from the entrance of Hamath to the brook of Egypt. On the 8th day they held a solemn assembly, for they kept the dedication of the altar 7 days, and the feast 7 days. On the 23rd day of the 7th month, he sent the people away to their tents, joyful and glad of heart, for the goodness that Yahweh had shown to David, and to Solomon, and to Israel his people. God's promise and warning. Thus Solomon finished the house of Yahweh, and the king's house, and he successfully completed all that came into Solomon's heart to make in the house of Yahweh, and in his own house. Yahweh appeared to Solomon by night, and said to him,
"I have heard your prayer, and have chosen this place to myself for a house of sacrifice. If I shut up the sky so that there is no rain, or if I command the locust to devour the land, or if I send pestilence among my people, if my people, who are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray, and seek my face, and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven, and will forgive their sin, and will heal their land. Now my eyes shall be open, and my ears attentive, to the prayer that is made in this place. For now have I chosen and made this house holy, that my name may be there forever, and my eyes and my heart shall be there perpetually. As for you, if you will walk before me, as David your father walked, and do according to all that I have commanded you, and will keep my statutes and my ordinances, then I will establish the throne of your kingdom, according as I covenanted with David your father, saying, "There shall not fail you a man to be ruler in Israel." But if you turn away, and forsake my statutes and my commandments which I have set before you, and shall go and serve other gods, and worship them, then I will pluck them up by the roots out of my land which I have given them, and this house which I have made holy for my name I will cast out of my sight, and I will make it a proverb and a byword among all peoples. This house, which is so high, everyone who passes by it shall be astonished, and shall say, Why has Yahweh done thus to this land and to this house? They shall answer, Because they abandoned Yahweh, the God of their fathers, who brought them forth out of the land of Egypt, and took other gods, worshipped them, and served them. Therefore he has brought all this evil on them.
Chapter 8. Solomon's Additional Accomplishments. It happened at the end of 20 years, in which Solomon had built the house of Yahweh and his own house, that the cities which Huram had given to Solomon, Solomon built them, and caused the children of Israel to dwell there. Solomon went to Hamath-zobah and prevailed against it. He built Tadmor in the wilderness, and all the storage cities, which he built in Hamath. Also he built Beth-horon the upper, and Beth-horon the lower, fortified cities, with walls, gates, and bars, and Baaleth, and all the storage cities that Solomon had, and all the cities for his chariots, and the cities for his horsemen, and all that Solomon desired to build for his pleasure in Jerusalem, and in Lebanon, and in all the land of his dominion. As for all the people who were left of the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, who were not of Israel, of their children who were left after them in the land, whom the children of Israel didn't consume, of them Solomon conscripted forced labor to this day. But of the children of Israel did Solomon make no servants for his work, for they were men of war, and chief of his captains, and rulers of his chariots and of his horsemen. These were the chief officers of King Solomon, even 250, who ruled over the people. Solomon brought up the daughter of Pharaoh out of the city of David, to the house that he had built for her. For he said, My wife shall not dwell in the house of David, king of Israel, because the places where the ark of Yahweh has come are holy. Then Solomon offered burnt offerings to Yahweh on the altar of Yahweh, which he had built before the porch, even as the duty of every day required, offering according to the commandment of Moses, on the Sabbaths, and on the new moons, and on the set feasts, 3 times in the year, even in the feast of unleavened bread, and in the feast of weeks, and in the feast of tents. He appointed, according to the ordinance of David his father, the divisions of the priests to their service, and the Levites to their offices, to praise and to minister before the priests, as the duty of every day required. The doorkeepers also by their divisions at every gate. For so had David, the man of God, commanded. They didn't depart from the commandment of the king to the priests and Levites concerning any matter, or concerning the treasures. Now all the work of Solomon was prepared to the day of the foundation of the house of Yahweh, and until it was finished. So the house of Yahweh was completed. Then went Solomon to Ezion-Geber, and to Eloth, on the seashore in the land of Edom. Huram sent him ships and servants, who had knowledge of the sea, by the hands of his servants. And they came with the servants of Solomon to Ophir, and fetched from there 450 talents of gold, and brought them to King Solomon. Chapter 9. The Queen of Sheba. When the Queen of Sheba heard of the fame of Solomon, she came to prove Solomon with hard questions at Jerusalem, with a very great train, and camels that bore spices, and gold in abundance, and precious stones. And when she was come to Solomon, she talked with him of all that was in her heart. Solomon told her all her questions, and there was not anything hidden from Solomon which he didn't tell her. When the Queen of Sheba had seen the wisdom of Solomon, and the house that he had built, and the food of his table, and the sitting of his servants, and the attendance of his ministers, and their clothing, his cupbearers also, and their clothing, and his ascent by which he went up to the house of Yahweh, there was no more spirit in her. She said to the king, "It was a true report that I heard in my own land of your acts, and of your wisdom. However, I didn't believe their words until I came, and my eyes had seen it. And behold, the half of the greatness of your wisdom was not told me. You exceed the fame that I heard. Happy are your men, and happy are these your servants, who stand continually before you, and hear your wisdom. Blessed be Yahweh your God, who delighted in you, to set you on his throne, to be king for Yahweh your God. Because your God loved Israel, to establish them forever, therefore made he you king over them, to do justice and righteousness." She gave the king 120 talents of gold, and spices in great abundance, and precious stones. Neither was there any such spice as the Queen of Sheba gave to King Solomon. The servants also of Huram, and the servants of Solomon, who brought gold from Ophir, brought algum trees and precious stones. The king made of the algum trees terraces for the house of Yahweh and for the king's house, and harps and stringed instruments for the singers, and there were none like these seen before in the land of Judah. King Solomon gave to the Queen of Sheba all her desire, whatever she asked, besides that which she had brought to the king. So she turned and went to her own land, she and her servants. Solomon's wealth and splendor. Now the weight of gold that came to Solomon in 1 year was 666 talents of gold, besides that which the traders and merchants brought. And all the kings of Arabia and the governors of the country brought gold and silver to Solomon. King Solomon made 200 bucklers of beaten gold. 600 shekels of beaten gold went to one buckler. He made 300 shields of beaten gold. 300 shekels of gold went to one shield. And the king put them in the house of the forest of Lebanon. Moreover, the king made a great throne of ivory, and overlaid it with pure gold. And there were 6 steps to the throne, with a footstool of gold, which were fastened to the throne, and stays on either side by the place of the seat, and 2 lions standing beside the stays. 12 lions stood there on the one side, and on the other on the 6 steps. There was nothing like it made in any kingdom. All King Solomon's drinking vessels were of gold, and all the vessels of the house of the forest of Lebanon were of pure gold. Silver was nothing accounted of in the days of Solomon, for the king had ships that went to Tarshish with the servants of Huram. Once every 3 years came the ships of Tarshish, bringing gold and silver, ivory, and apes and peacocks. So King Solomon exceeded all the kings of the earth in riches and wisdom. All the kings of the earth sought the presence of Solomon to hear his wisdom, which God had put in his heart. They brought every man his tribute, vessels of silver, and vessels of gold, and clothing, armor, and spices, horses and mules, a rate year by year. Solomon had 4,000 stalls for horses and chariots, and 12,000 horsemen that he stationed in the chariot cities, and with the king at Jerusalem. He ruled over all the kings, from the river even to the land of the Philistines, and to the border of Egypt. The king made silver to be in Jerusalem as stones, and he made cedars to be as the sycamore trees that are in the lowland for abundance. They brought horses for Solomon out of Egypt and out of all lands. The death of Solomon. Now the rest of the acts of Solomon, first and last, aren't they written in the history of Nathan the prophet, and in the prophecy of Ahijah the Shilonite, and in the visions of Iddo the seer concerning Jeroboam the son of Nebat? Solomon reigned in Jerusalem over all Israel 40 years. Solomon slept with his fathers, and he was buried in the city of David his father, and Rehoboam his son reigned in his place. Chapter 10. Rebellion against Rehoboam. Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all Israel were come to Shechem to make him king. It happened when Jeroboam the son of Nebat heard of it, for he was in Egypt, where he had fled from the presence of King Solomon, that Jeroboam returned out of Egypt. They sent and called him, and Jeroboam and all Israel came. And they spoke to Rehoboam, saying, Your father made our yoke grievous. Now, therefore, make you the grievous service of your father, and his heavy yoke which he put on us, lighter, and we will serve you. He said to them, Come again to me after 3 days. The people departed. King Rehoboam took counsel with the old men, who had stood before Solomon his father while he yet lived, saying, What counsel do you give me to return answer to this people? They spoke to him, saying, If you are kind to this people, and please them, and speak good words to them, then they will be your servants forever. But he forsook the counsel of the old men which they had given him, and took counsel with the young men who had grown up with him, who stood before him. He said to them, What counsel do you give, that we may return answer to this people, who have spoken to me, saying, Make the yoke that your father did put on us lighter? The young men who had grown up with him spoke to him, saying, Thus you shall tell the people who spoke to you, saying, Your father made our yoke heavy, but make it lighter on us. Thus you shall say to them, My little finger is thicker than my father's waist. Now, whereas my father burdened you with a heavy yoke, I will add to your yoke. My father chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scorpions. So Jeroboam and all the people came to Rehoboam the 3rd day, as the king asked, saying, Come to me again the 3rd day. The king answered them roughly. And King Rehoboam forsook the counsel of the old men, and spoke to them after the counsel of the young men, saying, My father made your yoke heavy, but I will add to it. My father chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scorpions. So the king didn't listen to the people, for it was brought about of God, that Yahweh might establish his word, which he spoke by Ahijah the Shilonite to Jeroboam the son of Nebat. The kingdom divided. When all Israel saw that the king didn't listen to them, the people answered the king, saying, What portion have we in David? Neither have we inheritance in the son of Jesse. Every man to your tents, Israel. Now see to your own house, David. So all Israel departed to their tents. But as for the children of Israel who lived in the cities of Judah, Rehoboam reigned over them. Then King Rehoboam sent Hadoram, who was over the men subject to forced labor, and the children of Israel stoned him to death with stones. King Rehoboam made speed to get himself up to his chariot, to flee to Jerusalem. So Israel rebelled against the house of David to this day. Chapter 11. Shemaiah's Prophecy. When Rehoboam was come to Jerusalem, he assembled the house of Judah and Benjamin, 180,000 chosen men who were warriors to fight against Israel, to bring the kingdom again to Rehoboam. But the word of Yahweh came to Shemaiah, the man of God, saying,
Speak to Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, king of Judah, and to all Israel in Judah and Benjamin, saying, Thus says Yahweh, You shall not go up, nor fight against your brothers. Return every man to his house, for this thing is of me.
So they listened to the words of Yahweh, and returned from going against Jeroboam. Rehoboam fortifies Judah. Rehoboam lived in Jerusalem and built cities for defense in Judah. He built Bethlehem and Edom and Tekoa, Bethzur and Soko and Adullam and Gath and Marisha and Zeph and Adoraim and Lachish and Azekah and Zorah and Ajalon and Hebron, which are in Judah and in Benjamin, fortified cities. He fortified the strongholds, and put captains in them, and stores of food, and oil, and wine. In every city he put shields and spears, and made them exceeding strong. Judah and Benjamin belonged to him. Priests and Levites forsaken by Jeroboam. The priests and the Levites who were in all Israel resorted to him out of all their border. For the Levites left their suburbs and their possession, and came to Judah and Jerusalem. For Jeroboam and his sons cast them off, that they should not execute the priest's office to Yahweh. And he appointed him priests for the high places, and for the male goats, and for the calves which he had made. After them, out of all the tribes of Israel, such as set their hearts to seek Yahweh, the God of Israel, came to Jerusalem to sacrifice to Yahweh, the God of their fathers. So they strengthened the kingdom of Judah, and made Rehoboam the son of Solomon strong. 3 years. For they walked 3 years in the way of David and Solomon. Rehoboam's family. Rehoboam took him a wife, Mahalath, the daughter of Jeremoth, the son of David, and of Abihail, the daughter of Eliab, the son of Jesse. And she bore him sons, Jeush, and Shemariah, and Zaham. After her he took Maacah, the daughter of Absalom, and she bore him Abijah, and Adai, and Ziza, and Shelomith. Rehoboam loved Maacah, the daughter of Absalom, above all his wives and his concubines. For he took 18 wives and 60 concubines, and became the father of 28 sons and 60 daughters. Rehoboam appointed Abijah, the son of Maacah, to be chief, even the prince among his brothers, for he was minded to make him king. He dealt wisely, and dispersed of all his sons throughout all the lands of Judah and Benjamin, to every fortified city, and he gave them food in abundance. He sought for them many wives. Chapter 12. Egypt invades Judah. It happened, when the kingdom of Rehoboam was established, and he was strong, that he forsook the law of Yahweh, and all Israel with him. It happened in the 5th year of King Rehoboam, that Shishak, king of Egypt, came up against Jerusalem, because they had trespassed against Yahweh, with 1,200 chariots and 60,000 horsemen. The people were without number who came with him out of Egypt, the Lubim, the Sukkiim, and the Ethiopians. He took the fortified cities which pertained to Judah and came to Jerusalem. Now Shemaiah the prophet came to Rehoboam and to the princes of Judah who were gathered together to Jerusalem because of Shishak, and said to them, Thus says Yahweh, You have forsaken me, therefore have I also left you in the hand of Shishak. Then the princes of Israel and the king humbled themselves, and they said, Yahweh is righteous. When Yahweh saw that they humbled themselves, the word of Yahweh came to Shemaiah, saying,
They have humbled themselves. I will not destroy them, but I will grant them some deliverance. And my wrath shall not be poured out on Jerusalem by the hand of Shishak. Nevertheless, they shall be his servants, that they may know my service and the service of the kingdoms of the countries.
Egypt plunders Jerusalem. So Shishak, king of Egypt, came up against Jerusalem, and took away the treasures of the house of Yahweh, and the treasures of the king's house. He took it all away. He also took away the shields of gold which Solomon had made. King Rehoboam made in their place shields of brass, and committed them to the hands of the captains of the guard, who kept the door of the king's house. It was so, that as often as the king entered into the house of Yahweh, the guard came and bore them, and brought them back into the guard room. When he humbled himself, the wrath of Yahweh turned from him, so as not to destroy him altogether. And moreover, in Judah there were good things found. The death of Rehoboam. So King Rehoboam strengthened himself in Jerusalem, and reigned. For Rehoboam was 41 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 17 years in Jerusalem, the city which Yahweh had chosen out of all the tribes of Israel to put his name there. And his mother's name was Naamah the Ammonitess. He did that which was evil, because he didn't set his heart to seek Yahweh. Now the acts of Rehoboam, first and last, aren't they written in the histories of Shemaiah the prophet and of Iddo the seer, after the way of genealogies? There were wars between Rehoboam and Jeroboam continually. Rehoboam slept with his fathers and was buried in the city of David, and Abijah, his son, reigned in his place.